Welcome to Astrology Off the Charts. We are three professional astrologers, friends, and lifelong students of the human experience, exploring astrology through thoughtful conversation. We're glad you're here. I am Ryan Barrett.
I'm Lisa Hagenbuch.
And I'm Alexander Mallon, and we are your hosts. And today, this episode, we have a wonderful additional pro astrologer, long time astrologer who knows her stuff, our lovely guest, Janet Booth. So, Janet, I'll just introduce you here, but please take it away once I do. So, Janet is a fellow professional astrologer. She's a professional astrologer for 45 years and counting, author, public speaker, NCGR level 2 certified. She's produced and hosted also her own TV show, Looking Up, from the year 2000 to 2020, and served as the president of the Astrological Society of Connecticut, which is certainly how I know dear Janet. So, Janet, we're so pleased. Thank you for gracing us and joining us today. We're loving that you're here.
Thank you. Thank you, Alexander.
Yeah.
Alexander emailed a lot of people and was celebrating his 50th anniversary in astrology.
Mm-hmm.
I responded to that email and I said, me too. And so this summer was 50 years since I took my first astrology course. And it didn't take long, like I was a fish to water, duck to water, whatever you say. And I must have been a professional, I don't know. Yes, I would say professional astrologer in many past lives because it came to me like that. And it didn't take long before I was looking at people's charts, and a few years before I charged anybody for it, but I was doing serious astrology work right from the get-go. So that was a long time ago, 1976.
Wow.
Yes,
Yeah,
it was.
50 years ago.
Janet, I'm curious, what was the thing that got you interested in astrology initially?
Well, if you look on my website, it tells a little story, but it started with a Libra t-shirt I had when I was in high school. And that was during the bra burning summer of love. And bra, and I said, oh, liberated my bra. And I would put on the t-shirt and leave the house and take off the bra. But that was just the start of my interest in astrology. And I said, I knew there was something to my sun sign because I was boy crazy since kindergarten. But I didn't really study it seriously until I was out of college. I had a degree in behavioral studies, which was psychology, sociology, anthropology, a very good background, not intending to go into astrology, not knowing. And then I was dating a magician, like, rabbit out of the hat. But he was also interested in white magic. And he said, oh, I'm going to go take this introduction to astrology class. And we both lived in Hartford, and that was in a suburb. And he said, you want to take it with me? I said, well, if you give me a ride. Well, good thing that summer I got my first car because we broke up. He dropped out of the class and I got hooked on astrology. When I looked back at my chart, maybe years later, when I knew things about progressions, secondary progressions, and stations of planets, I found that when I started my astrological studies, Uranus in the 10th house, which was perfect indicator for going into a career in astrology, was stationing to turn retrograde. And then some years later, when it came back exactly to the natal degree, was when I quit my day job because I'd been doing astrology on the side. And that's when I said, I'm going full time. And that was not planned either. It's Uranus. It's surprise. So that's what happened.
So, Janet, was that the summer of 76?
That's when I started studying.
Same with myself. So we need to share some notes about what the heck was going on by transit that at least two of us were literally born at that time as students of astrology, lifelong.
That would be fun to look at.
Must be some interesting transits for a second. I had to go back and think about that.
Yeah, yeah. I was literally born that year as well. So
Okay.
I love it.
So
Well,
I
Yeah.
do normal astrology, and then I do, weird stuff. I love the weird stuff. Like I was very drawn to the vertex. The first time I ever heard anybody speak of the vertex, fated. It's about relationships. I went, oh, tell me more.
Mhm.
That was something I always put in a chart, kind of figured out what it was meaning because there was very little written about it. And then the one and only time I was an official speaker at UAC was in '02, and it was on the vertex.
Oh, wonderful.
After that, I had an article published in the Mountain Astrologer the next year on the vertex. And I also like things like quintiles. And many astrologers don't use that. That's instead of dividing the circle into, half, quarter, the normal things, it's fifth and 2/5, and it has to do with luck and talent. I said, oh, that sounds like good stuff. Tell me more. So I've looked into that into depth as well, and I speak on that.
Wonderful. Very, I certainly join you in that. Quintiles, septiles are all really interesting minor aspects, and they're really just super juicy. And the vertex is very cool too. And I kind of we'll have to talk more another time, or all of us together, about the prime vertical, because that's a whole other thing that most astrologers, we don't really know the astronomy of that and what exactly that that great circle is all about in astro speak. But it's a key factor to the vertex anti-vertex, right?
Oh, yes. Well, ancient astrology had no vertex. It took until the 20th century when Edward Jandro and Charles Jane came up with that together. Really, Jandro, but he was looking for what he called the electric ascendant. He was trying to establish an electromagnetic connection between astrology and charts and science and
Cool.
everything. And Jane said to him, what's more important than the ascendant is the opposite point to that, which was the vertex.
Totally cool. I'm eating it up. I can't wait that we talk more, all of us, and or you and I. We're gonna definitely all the above will be happening. So, well, that's a great introduction. We have a couple of slides to aid in your sharing with us. Now, I think it's really important too that the viewers and the listeners understand something important about Janet. Not only she's given us a good sense of how rich her many decades of study and practice are. But this is one that I've heard you speak about before a number of times, Janet, and maybe I've even looked up gone to your website and looked it up and scratched my head a number of times. I'm still scratching my head again, but I'm hoping that you can help clarify. So, Janet, you discovered this phenomenon. I think you're owning it. It's yours, baby. Moon grooves. So I'm going to take it away, Janet. Maybe you can sort of fill us in
Yeah.
on moon grooves.
For about 17 years, I wrote an astrological calendar called Janet's Planets. And it was a lot of work. And it couldn't really break into the big boys marketing because Llewellyn just has that sewn up. And if it wasn't Llewellyn, it was Maynard. And, so after a while, I kind of abandoned ship. But during the process of writing that, and actually even before I started the calendar, I've always made a retrograde bar chart for the year. Then I started adding the moons, the new moons, the full moons. And then I realized from looking at 1 year's to the next year's to the next year's, it's like, wow, here these degrees are repeating, they're repeating, they're repeating. But it crossed the calendar year. So if an astrologer just sits down and says, oh, what are the new moons and full moons for 2026? Well, makes my list. What are they for 2027? You might not notice this repetition. And then once I started paying even more attention to it, I found, wow, it's always, because I put it in the calendar, it's always from the fall to the spring. What is up with this? So then I had to learn a little more astronomy to understand it. And Alex will appreciate this about the aphelion and the perihelion. And I actually contacted an astronomer to ask if there was any name in astronomy for the phenomenon that I had noticed. And she said no. I said, oh, good, then I get to name it. And I name it moon grooves. She said, You could think of it as equal synodic cycles. Okay, Alex will understand that. But basically, when there's an elliptical orbit, the sun's not exactly in the center of the Earth's orbit around the sun. It's a little off center. This is maybe an exaggeration. When the Earth gets closer to the sun, it actually speeds up a little bit in its pace because of the gravity of the sun. And what happens is, each lunar cycle is approximately the same length from the standpoint of how long does it take the moon to complete its orbit around Earth. But when we remember that Earth is moving, and then as Earth is moving closer to perihelion and away from perihelion, those periods from new moon to new moon become equal, and they are very close exactly to 30 degrees. On the other half of the year, when the Earth approaches the aphelion, it's a little bit slowed down, but also it has to go a little further. I thought I had this figured out. Anyway, it doesn't make it as far through the zodiac degrees in that time that the moon goes around the Earth. So it's dropping down a little bit by degree. So if you said in 2025, the fall of 25, we started having new moons at 28 to 29 degrees of each sign. That went to spring of 2026. When we get to fall of 2026, there's going to be a repeating beginning at 17. So when I started looking at these, I went, wow, when the next groove comes in, it's always 11 degrees less or lower in the zodiac than the groove before. And that's because during the summer months, or northern hemisphere, I'll say around the Cancer solstice, which is close to the aphelion, it's losing ground. It's slipping about 1 to 2 degrees per month. And the overall net effect is 11 degrees less. Now, what also is interesting, we all learn that eclipses repeat in the Metonic cycle after 19 years. All lunar degrees, lunations, repeat in a 19-year cycle. So these same moon grooves we're going to have this fall were 19 years ago, 38 years ago. They'll be 19 years from now, 38 years from now. So there's, like I'm thinking, okay, when I go to UAC, I'm going to bring my ephemeris with me to look up for people who sit down at my booth with me. And if they're born before 1950, because I'm bringing the trans-century ephemeris, I only have to look up something that's going to be 19 years difference. I'll know what their moon grooves are.
So this, of course, is similar for those of us who don't follow the perihelion and aphelion of the Earth to the sun, but it's also helpful for us to understand, let's say, the nodal axis itself, the moon's nodes that we're also familiar with, an 18.6-year cycle. So this is a parallel, if you will, to that 19-year. Is that what do we can sort of understand that the celestial mechanics of it?
I am such a fuss budget. I don't go the 18 and a half. It's not 19. This doesn't have anything in my mind, or my knowledge, nothing to do with the new moon's nodes. I mean, it's interesting that they're close.
So we have these repeating. Is that what you're saying? We're having, and it's for a period of months.
It's like right around 6 months. Yes.
So is in other words 6 months of the perihelion cycle and 6 months of the aphelion cycle. Is that
pretty much? The perihelion cycle begins very close to the Libra equinox. Whenever new and full moons are right close to that equinox, and ends near the Aries equinox.
Right. We could say this is an important issue that, down under, when in January we are having winter they are having their summer. And
Correct.
so when Australia is having their summer, the Earth-Sun relationship is at its closest. In other words, they're really roasting down there, down under. We can think of Australia in the Australian outback as like roastarola. It's really roasty. That's because the Earth is closest to the Sun in December, I mean, really January. So that winter solstice, right? So it's winter solstice for us. It's actually summer solstice
Right.
for
I
them.
wanted to mention that because usually when I speak of it, I'll talk about the fall equinox to the spring equinox, and that is northern hemisphere prejudiced. Yeah.
Right.
But I'm
I see.
glad you brought up the nodes because when the nodes are in the signs of the equinoxes, which they recently were, you'll have your moon grooves begin and end with eclipses,
Ooh.
which is juicier.
Hmm.
Yes. And where I really like to look at these is not only on the transiting basis, but I go back to people's birth and see what cycle were they born into. Are you born in the, I'll use them in northern hemisphere. If you're born in the fall or the winter, you're born in a moon groove. Your progressed new moons, degrees, and full moons repeat. So, wow, that's hitting something in your natal chart. That's biggity biggity across the course of your whole life. And if you're born in the summer, you don't get any of that in your lifetime progressions.
So when in the summer above the equator in the northern hemisphere, when the moon-sun relationship is at aphelion, is most distant, that person is not going to be born into that groove
When
time.
the earth sun
Did
is,
I say moon? Forgive
yeah,
me, Earth Sun. I meant to say it's habituation from the lunar nodes, the Earth Sun relationship. So maybe you could pick that up again and say it the right way for those people. I messed it up.
that's okay. Because the time frame from the Aries equinox to the Libra equinox is when the degrees of the new and full moon slip back to a lower degree of the zodiac by 1 to 2 degrees per month. People who are born in late spring in the northern hemisphere and through the summer months do not have grooves in their progressed moon lineup.
Only those people born at near perihelion are going to have those grooves.
Well, it's a 6 month period. So
Mm-hmm.
it really goes equinox to equinox.
Uh-huh.
So you could even be born late summer, say you're a Virgo, but maybe your first progressed new moon, it's in Libra, the next one's Scorpio, the next one's Sag. Those could be grooves.
Will
So,
they be, you're saying near the same degree, each of those moons?
Yeah, less than a degree orb.
Hmm.
That's the thing that made me start taking notice of this.
So
Yeah.
what you're getting at then is
Happens
that
like clockwork.
you're saying that each of those new moons, by secondary progression, will be back every new moon around that degree orb. And whatever that new moon is, or that secondary progressed moon is doing each month, it's triggering those same degrees in your chart, those same
Yes,
aspects. That's what you're also getting at, yeah?
yes, yes. So, for instance, let's just make up a person's chart. They're born with Mars at 22 degrees of something, and then they're born in a groove that has full moons at 22. So they're going to get aspects from those full moons throughout their life at their progressed full moons, different aspects, but it's going to keep hitting Mars, Mars, Mars. So
Mhm.
whatever Mars means in their chart, that's a lifelong big deal.
Wow.
Brilliant.
Wow. I know you have an example of this too with the chart. I'm super curious to see how this plays out. I did have a clarifying question though. I know you mentioned the Metonic cycle, and my mind went to Saros cycles, which is the 1811
Different,
11
and
days, totally different, and those don't relate to one another in what we're talking about here, correct?
no,
Okay, just making sure.
correct. Yep.
So let me bring back that visual for those who are watching on YouTube, some of Janet's slides to help us sort of follow through a little bit this. And so here, this slide, just to solidify, if you could, share again, and then we'll go to maybe a chart.
Okay. I call them moon grooves because the moon, new moon, full moon, they get into a groove and they repeat at the same degree from sign to sign to sign for 6 months. And then they lose ground. I call that the slipstream between the Aries and Libra equinoxes, which is on either side of the aphelion.
Interesting. Fascinating. So here we have an example chart. Yeah.
Yes. So Carole King, she is a juicy example for all kinds of things in astrology.
You might
If
want to
you
double
know-
check with the audience who that is because
Okay.
there
Carole
are
is
20-year-olds.
oldie but a goodie from the 60s on. She was a singer and songwriter and very well known for her key album was Tapestry, but she was friends with James Taylor, who's maybe an oldie for some of the youngsters as well. And
These are key 60s poets and singers and like super famous.
yes. So if you know Jackie Slevin, she wrote a book on midheavens, careers, whatever aspect is in closest, or whatever planet is in closest aspect to your midheaven is a key career indicator. So no surprise in Carole's chart, it's Neptune and it's in a sextile and a career in music, perfect for her. And I mean, she took to music like the duck to water, whatever that phrase was. I wasn't sure if it's fish or duck. Like 3 or 4. At 4, she's learning how to play piano from her mother. So she's born in the third quarter phase of the moon. And if that's about a roughly 28-year cycle, 29, that means at around age 6 or 7, she's going to have her first progressed new moon. And it won't be too long, 15 years or so from that, when she's going to have a progressed full moon. So what we see in her chart is that the moon groove that she's born in, because she's in Aquarius, is 29 degrees, I believe, for the new moons, and the full moons are 11. So that's not making sense. It can't be 29. Got to be about 26. I'm having a little hard time seeing those degrees, but maybe I'm going to see it on my own screen down here. Anyway, if you'll note, her midheaven is 29 degrees of Cancer. So that means the moon is the ruling planet of it, and the moon is at 11. So she's having the full moon grooves for her moon. That is one of her career indicators. And then the other, what's the degree on the Neptune?
Neptune is 29 of Virgo.
It is. Okay.
In her chart.
Okay. So her progressed sun at her first progressed new moon was in Aquarius, because she's also Aquarius sun. That was in her 4th house. You'd think, that's not necessarily the creative house, but then the sun progressed into the 5th. And, the full moon was from the 5th, and the 5th is the creative house. So we find that. But we also, if you notice that her south node is in Pisces, so if you see, the nodal axis, when a newer full moon comes up near that, you're going to have the eclipse. Okay, so maybe you can go to the next slide. Okay, here's where we have a little more information. So, I usually look at the new moon before birth. And that's something I learned from Dietrich Pessin, who's a brilliant astrologer. That was, so she's born into a cycle that when her chart comes along, it's making a grand trine with Uranus and Neptune. So unusual imagination and musical talent.
So this says the new moon before birth was 29 Capricorn,
Correct.
Therefore on her nadir.
Very good. That's right. And where does it do? Shoots the energy right up to the midheaven.
up to that Pluto midheaven conjunction she's got. So the new moon before birth is a 29 cap at the nadir of her chart and opposite her midheaven. It's also aspecting her Neptune,
Oh, yes. And
the new
Yeah,
moon
it-
before birth.
And so
Astrology.
nadir for the audience is at the fourth house cusp at the directly opposite the midheaven, which is career, just to explain that term.
yes. Okay. So then she has her first progressed new moon, and it's making inconjuncts to Neptune and the midheaven. Now, the inconjunct is considered a minor aspect, but when you get inconjuncts to 2 points that are in sextile to each other, you get the pattern called the yod, or I like to call it the finger of God. And that's where one kind of weird thing leads to something else, but in the end, it's all works out and it's good. And it's a strong pattern. It's a nice, for anybody into geometry, isosceles triangle. So she had that going. And that cycle was really where things started popping for her at a young age. I mean, by the time she's 20, she's already writing hits and coming out with her own music and album. You know, I think it was 71 was when Tapestry came out. And she's born in 42. So, well, let's see, that would be almost 30. Anyway, it was early part of her life. So her first progressed full moon, 11 and change of Virgo, and that was an eclipse. It's near her north node. Squares her midheaven ruler. See, in astrology, people like get down on squares. Squares make things happen. I see nods from Ryan. Everybody. Yep.
Squares make things happen.
That's
Yeah.
right.
I always say squares equal growth.
Yes. Love your squares.
Yeah.
Yeah. And would another, since I'm sorry, pardon me for interrupting. I mean, I think about the premise of our collective show intent, this idea of humanism. So we think of, aspects, of course, aspects coincide, or, we get into the astrologies talk, squares or aspects make things happen, what have you. Is it maybe is it fair to think that the chart also might show a release, like one's inner groove, sort of one's inner patterning, and that when we go through developmental phases, that when you study psychology when you're in high school or college, there are these developmental phases. I think of the primary developmental phases at age 7, 14, 21, the Saturn cycle. And so astrologers discover that these cycles that we see are sort of psychoactive. That's the wrong word, psychoactive, but it is functional. That as you mature, there's kind of like these release points, these coming of age points. And I wonder, that might be another, we think of astrology as being that retrograde Mercury, that full moon eclipse, but there's also the inner rising. There's the outer, and then there's as above, so below. I don't know, just throwing that out.
Well, I knew there was something with 20. 20 was when she had her first progressed full moon. And she was, by that point in time, already writing, if not for her own performances, but for bigger for let's say performers that were up and coming. But yeah. So then we know how eclipses come in a pair at least. So she had the full moon was by progression was an eclipse, and then the next new moon was also an eclipse. And that one was opposite her natal Neptune, sextile Uranus. Well, nothing wrong with an opposition either. What do you think, Ryan?
Yeah. Again, tension.
Tension
Tension and growth.
Yeah. Love the opposition. Yep. Yeah. So those her big years were in the 60s and the 70s, and she kept doing some other things after that, but that surrounded that progressed new moon eclipse that she had in 76. And things have slowed down some by that. But her third progressed new moon, because it was Aries, almost to Taurus, it's out of the groove area, the groove is starting to fade. Now it has an orb, a bigger orb on it. So you can look at a lot of different features for transits or other things, but just from a standpoint of progressed um, new and full moons in the groove.
So the secondary progressed.
Yes.
The first secondary progressed new moon at 2606 Aquarius for Carole King. That was an eclipse. Was that an eclipse moon?
No, the next two were eclipses.
Oh, I see. Okay. And so that first 2606 Aquarius new moon that was conjoining her sun, of course, was in a finger of God, a Yod aspect to her Midheaven and her Neptune. Of course, Neptune, I think of like
Yes.
music and creativity.
Yes, I wouldn't call it conjunct her sun, but
No, technically, thank you. Okay.
depends on what orb you like. I'm an orb snob. Okay, but
and then you say that was her first secondary progression.
because she's only like 7 years old at that point. So that's 7 degrees past her birth degree for the sun.
Wow. Interesting.
Oh yeah.
Do we know anything that might have happened to her at age 7, such a fundamental foundational age?
Not exactly, but I know from a young age when she learned music, she really loved to please her father. She said he had a smile that filled the bottom half of his face, and he would have visitors over and say, "Oh, my daughter will perform for us." So already she was performing music on a small scale at that age.
I look at the natal chart, which so often happens. Mercury and Venus can never be far from the sun orbitally, astronomically. We all know that. Most students of astrology do. But I would look at, here's where I use absurdly wide orbs. I look at that Venus in Aquarius and that sun in Aquarius, and I think, sun being daddy, most of us would look at that in psychoanalytic astrology, sun daddy. And I would think that Venus sun, there's some dad may be adoring this child.
Mm-hmm.
And you're telling me dad, absolutely. So her son's on the kind of the cusp of her 4th to 5th. This is Placidus.
20-degree sun, and the cusp of the 5th in Placidus is 2 Pisces. So I'd say no, but it depends on what orbs you like.
Yeah, I would separate it from that 5th house as well.
I'm curious, Lisa, what would you do with it?
That we all grow into the next sign, the next house.
Right.
For astrologers, what would Lisa say about that cusp being 2 Pisces and the sun being 20 Aquarius?
Yeah, I would tend to keep it in the 4th too, just because I go up to 10, and that's a little over. And but certainly the fact that that Sun Mercury is so conjoined, that her voice, her expression, all of that, and the parental influence.
So I look at it from a quadrant standpoint, but that's cool. Anyway, I'm interested. Yeah,
in Vedic astrology, if they're in the same sign, they're conjunct.
Yeah.
When we talk about the sun and Venus, same sign.
So planets in Vedic and planets that are in the same sign are discussed as being conjoined, whether their
signs are a little different than ours, but
right. So whether you have a 1-degree Venus and a 29-degree sun, they would say by sign, if they're in the same sign, still conjoined. That's the Vedic way.
They're in that sidereally, yes. If you convert this to sidereal, they're in the same sign. But if you had 29 tropical, it would not be. But yeah.
I don't know her biography, but I would be curious to know what was going on around age 11 when that sun, by progression, hit that 5th house.
Yep, I'm not sure. But there's a very, very long Wikipedia article about her. Very long. She's had a very prolific career. She was the first woman to be awarded the Gershwin Prize for music.
Wow.
And that was given to her at the White House, where the concert that goes with that award was performed by Obama. So pretty exciting.
So getting back to your moon grooves, the first progressed new moon at 26 Aquarius was aspecting her Midheaven and her Neptune. The first progressed full moon
Yes.
was at 11 degrees of Virgo.
Yes.
And that first progressed full moon at 11 Virgo, that was a moon groove.
Oh, yes. She's totally in the moon groove until she gets to about her second or third progressed new moon. The third one is when she's really, the groove is starting to slip. So you can see the second one is 2545, but the new moon before birth, 2609. The first progressed new moon, 2606. So then we come down to 2545, the next one, 2459. If she lives a long time, seeing Taurus, it'll be 2346. Groove is definitely over by then. I only
Can
need
I,
a 2-degree orb for that, although I'm being a little generous for her since
Mhm.
her Midheaven and Neptune are both at 29 and the groove was at 26, but it fits so well.
can I interject something here? I just Googled, and at age 11, she experienced major family upheaval when her parents began having serious marital troubles and decided to separate.
Whoa, okay.
Okay.
So it was in her memoir. She witnessed their constant arguments, on again, off again splits, deeply affected her childhood and shaped her lifelong longing for a stable home, FYI.
Well, guess what? Because she's got that square to the moon.
Mhm.
Mhm. Right.
Well, at the first progressed full moon. But let's
Right.
see how old she was then. Hold on. Oh, I think that she was 20 by then. So, okay, so at 11, it's not part of this moon groove pattern too much. I mean,
Mhm.
But
yeah.
with the sun
But
still being in the fourth house,
Mhm. Yes. 11 was when she progressed into
into
Pisces.
the, yes. Mhm.
Okay.
right.
Yes.
Age 11. So she was at 2 degrees. So I wonder, we're saying that if at age 11, that her progressed sun went to 2 degrees of Pisces, then therefore at age 9, her sun would have essentially progressed into 0 of Pisces at age
Or like
9, 10.
9, 10. Yes, because she's
Mhm.
born with it at 20 and change.
Mhm.
Right. Right.
Yep. Yep. And then, yes, it gets out of the fourth house, the family house. It leaves.
Mhm.
And now her main impulse, the sun, is going to be for her creativity. Instead
Right.
of her family, it's to take it and to
Mhm.
birth something out of all of that.
Mhm.
Yeah, it would be interesting to see what the transits were at that time, but from a progressed standpoint, I always take that as sort of the inside out, right? It's what's happening in the internal world and
Mhm.
how then that sort of evolves into what they're experiencing in the outside world.
Yep.
Since we are a little more technical this particular episode and others to come as well, you're also saying that that progressed sun that entered the fifth is validating these Placidus cusps. That we're having, a Placidus
Mhm.
Hmm.
fifth house cusp of 2 degrees. There's a lot of discussion. Many astrologers now say, whole sign houses is the only way to go, and or equal house is the only way to go. So it's,
Uh,
this does not necessarily define, although, I certainly think it's interesting.
I'm a
I,
Placidus girl through and through,
yeah,
always and
Yeah,
forever.
same.
I typically use Placidus, but I have been experimenting with whole sign. And what the interesting thing that I found is that they both work. It's not one or the other. There is benefit to both,
Mhm.
and they may trigger on different things, and there may be uh, from a technical standpoint, some of the things that would come up, similar types of um, techniques that one would use happening in different ways in both types of charts. So it's fascinating to me that they work on different levels.
I feel like you can have different tarot decks and
Yeah,
you can still get valid readings from those.
agreed.
It's another lens.
Yeah, agreed.
Mhm.
But I agree. I was raised on Placidus, and that's what I typically use
Well,
too.
yeah. I mean, we're definitely at least a couple of winter births here, so tend to get stuck, tend to get fixated into a certain groove. We're all autumn and fall, which is more about the inward. So I tend to often take it stuck. So yeah, I'm also Placidus because of really just training and.
Yeah.
But it's interesting when Bob Hand, I think, popularized Koch houses or Koch, the correct pronunciation for the German Koch, Koch, or is how you say it actually, I believe, or
Yes.
Koch,
Yes.
Koch. So
Coke.
Koch or Koch, right? Or Koch. So we call it Koch, just for clarity. So the Koch houses or Koch house system is close to Placidian, but not quite the same beast, and will yield some different results. And I think that maybe he had said the Koch houses, for instance, are more about the individual, and the Placidus might be more about the the eventual in the outer world. But this is this idea of, as you say brilliantly, Janet, different tarot systems or different systems of thinking can yield different ideas and different results, and often all very interestingly valid.
And then I wanted to just briefly speak to the transiting use, and my chart was being an example for that.
Great. So we'll go to your chart next.
Sure.
Okay. So can I announce your data? Is that okay for the listeners?
Yep.
They could look up Carole King's data, which maybe I should have given that. Carole King's data was February 9 of 1942, 11:42 in the evening in Brooklyn, New York. That's Carole King. And for our guest speaker here, the wonderful Janet Booth, we've got October 1st, October 1, 1952 at 4:32 in the morning in Putnam, Connecticut. So so fill us in, Janet. You know your chart really well.
True confessions time. My moon in Pisces. I love wine. I won't say women in song, but wine and song. Some of the other spirits as well. And for many, many years, I enjoyed those spirits a little too much. And after mooey decades of that, it occurred to me that perhaps my liver was being affected. So I went to my doctor and I said, I think I should check my liver for fatty liver disease. And she said, no problem. It's an easy little, they do the one ultrasound. Okay. So sure enough, I had fatty liver disease. So I said, what do you do? She says, well, you stop drinking. I said, well, forever? She goes, well, ideally, but at least do it for a year and then we'll test your liver again. I said, okay, you got a deal. So 51 weeks later, after not one drop of alcohol, I retested. And fortunately, I had the type of fatty liver disease that is alcohol related. The more common is the non-alcohol related, which means I could have given up alcohol for that year and had no difference to my liver.
Wow.
And I am a lucky woman. I always say that. So my liver was good, and now I can return to moderate drinking, which I do. And it's much, much, much more moderate. But what was happening was the full moon groove was on my ascendant. The new moon groove was on my moon. And I quit in October until the next year, October. So I was definitely about halfway through the year when that groove ended. And during the course of that, not only did I get rid of the fatty liver disease, I dropped about 25 or more pounds in 2 sizes and reached what I think I would like to maintain on an ongoing basis. In my prior years, there have been times when I've been back and forth in like a 50-pound range. And so I'm very happy to be down here. I don't have to be a size 10. I'm happy to be a size 12. I hit my weight goal, and I've had it for a whole year that I've been at my weight goal. It's actually even dropped just slightly. So I think of that as being a good example. And I'm pretty sure that a fixed star in Pisces called the Cup is right near my moon. And it kind of has to do with, the cup. Goblet, shall we say.
Are you referring to the constellation Crater? Crater of the Cup? Is that what you're referring to?
I remember looking up something in Bernadette Brady's book, which I don't have handy at the moment. But I remember there being something about Pisces in the cup. And maybe it's the vertex conjunct my moon. Maybe it's not 9, maybe it's 11. It's in the neighborhood.
So there is a fixed there is a star at 9 degrees Pisces, Scott, SKAT or Scat.
Scott.
And
I always wondered
Scott.
Shiat, but yeah.
No, Shiat's 29.
Oh, okay.
That's
Scott
different.
is
Yeah.
a different.
One. Okay.
And it's typically associated with luck or the wish bringer.
Ooh, yes.
So
Yep. That's just one little piece.
So could you lead us through that? Because the moon grooves for me is still a new concept. Do you mind if you, is it okay, guys, if I ask her to
please,
just take us through this again?
Right. Okay.
curious as well.
So hold on. So you've got an 8-degree Libra sun in the first house with a Libra pileup of Mercury, Saturn, Neptune.
Yep.
You've got a moon in Pisces at 9 degrees. So you've got a sun at 8 Libra in the first house with a Virgo rising at 23.
Yes.
And you have a moon at 9 degrees in the 6th house, amongst other things, of health, let's say, right? So, yeah. So take it from there, if you would.
Well, it was in October that I went to the doctor and they told me to stop drinking. And that was in 2024. And the moon groove was just getting started at that time with the new moons at 9. So new habits, moon is habits for health in the 6th house. And the blossoming, the flourishing, the upshot was going to be appearance and health ascendant, what was receiving all of the full moons. So for the first 6 months out of 12 that I go through this new regimen, it's got the reinforcement month after month after month from the moon grooves.
Each preceding month was around 9. And so it kept aspecting by degree that 9-degree new moon that you had that was on that 6th when you thought health-wise I should check in with my doc about my...
No, it was probably closer to my birthday with the sun, which was probably receiving a full moon at that time. Yeah.
Got it.
So the full moon, I'm sorry, Lisa, go ahead.
No, go ahead, Alexander, you go
first.
first.
Just to double check, so the new moon groove at 9 degrees falls new moon, of course, on your moon in Pisces in the 6th. And the full moon would therefore be opposite, and that fell at 24. And when that's therefore near your ascendant, huh?
Yes, yes.
Okay. So that was a part that I don't know that you had to explain really, to clarify for those listening versus viewing. Maybe you could. But Lisa, you had a quick. I'm sorry, I don't mean to be the moderator, but Lisa had a thought.
No, it's okay. I just was thinking for the audience. So what you're saying is that this is an example of at this time in your life versus being born with a moon groove. At this time, a moon groove was activated significantly in your chart.
I was not born with that as a moon groove, but this was by transit.
Yes.
Right. So in October, let's say in September, there was a full moon eclipse that was on my descendant opposite my ascendant. So it's probably making me think about my body, my health, my appearance.
Right.
And the new moon was very close to my birthday. That was at 10. But the degree that repeated starting with the next new moon was 9999. 9.
Yeah. So what I was kind of clarifying maybe is that even if you weren't necessarily born during those months where you're going to automatically get one when you're born, this can still be activated for anybody at various times in their life.
Anybody can have these things by transit. I was born in the time of the year to get something by progression.
So Janet Love, you said by transit. You mean by secondary progression? You said it can happen by transit.
Right.
But yeah.
You want to explain secondary progression?
No, but you're meaning initially that the moon grooves are really by secondary progression. Yeah,
they are. But in the months after you're born, which turn into your secondary progressions, the transits of those months become your progressions. Right? Each day after a year is signified, or each year after birth is signified by every day after your birthday. So like when I said, oh, it was time for me to study astrology when I was 23 because there was a secondary progressed station of Uranus in my 10th house. That would have happened 23 days after I was born. And then that becomes my progression.
Hmm.
The moon groove in 25 in the spring ended with an eclipse on my ascendant. So it began with an eclipse opposite my ascendant. It ended with an eclipse full moon on my ascendant. That doesn't happen every year, but it happens every 19 years. Well, no, there'll be new moons and full moons. They may not always be eclipses. After a while, eclipses will slip out of the repeating degree. But the moon grooves always repeat in the 19 years, the same metonic cycle.
So, Janet, this really is, first of all, very powerful and really full of kind of packed with all kinds of juicy change periods that you discovered here. And this came about because you did Janet's planets calendars that were sort of Jim Maynard-esque. Was an example that the average person might know for many years.
Yeah. Mine were more interpretational than his were. I tried to sell him on incorporating my interpretations with his math or his degrees and all that, but I didn't get a bite on that one. But every year when I would create this retrograde bar chart, and I had a companion document to it, I would talk about what degrees are going to be the new moons and full moons in the grooves. That's when I came up with the word. And that's when I started noticing that it was always, always from fall to spring, from fall to spring. And that was before I knew anything about the perihelion. So there you go, folks.
This is fascinating. Go ahead.
Nothing, just said
I was just going to ask from a practical standpoint, just looking up in your own chart and seeing kind of where all this is hitting. Do you start with kind of seeing where the eclipses were before and after birth and just kind of mapping that up or chewing that up with your progress chart?
Not necessarily, but I do always look at the progressed new and full moons throughout life. And then if you're born in the right time of year, you're going to have a groove, but your groove may not touch a thing in your natal chart. But it might touch 3 or 4 things. If you got 3 or 4 things at about the same degree that are an aspect to each other, it might set off a grand trine. Boom, 30 years later. Boom, 30 years later. Boom, big stuff.
Yeah.
Carole's was kind of like that, because she had the sextile.
Shall I go back to that chart? Would that be helpful?
The sextile from one side from Uranus to her midheaven, and the sextile from the other side to her midheaven from Neptune. And, all you needed was something near the IC, the foot of the chart, to turn that into a kite. And that's what she was born into. Not just grand trine I wrote there, but the kite, which I always think lifts the energy up.
So this strikes me that this has become a central point of your work with your clients.
I always look at it. I don't know if I could call it a central point, but I don't leave it out.
Depends on if it's hitting what's in their chart. Yeah.
Right.
Right.
I hit nothing, and then you don't talk about it.
Yeah.
Right.
You don't make them sad that they don't have it.
Right. First, do no harm.
Very good.
Yeah.
So since this is the moon groove, I wonder what comes to mind are sort of idea systems around each planet and its meaning, and I wonder if you could sort of expand on that, because the moon, of course, well, each astrologer has their own relationship to it, guys, but I'm kind of wondering what your thoughts might be. And this is for everybody, really, but.
And you're talking specifically the moon?
Yeah, I haven't thought too much about it from the standpoint of what the moon signifies on its own, but more in the sense of the aspects we're receiving from it. And it's a trigger. You know, in your secondary progressions, absolutely a trigger. In your transits, a trigger. So is there something there for it to trigger or not?
There's no question. I think you guys might remember, somebody probably listening or watching will remember for me, but early in July, we had that Mars-Uranus conjunction. And I believe when that has been hit a few times by, either conjunction by the moon or opposition by the moon or square, we've been having a very upwelling, upheaval-oriented kind of summer. Does that feel resonant with you, other astrologers here?
Mm-hmm.
Anybody comment about that?
The entire summer, I would say, has had quite a bit of upheaval. But I think that one in particular, just looking at where Mars and Uranus were around that 4-degree mark in Gemini. And, you talk about the moon being a trigger when the moon was moving around and hit that point. There certainly were things happening at the time. And I know we talked about some of them here on this podcast, but I think for a lot of people and what I've been hearing in one-on-one consultations is that there's been a lot of change and upheaval in people's lives. And I think, those 3 planets in particular coming together, Uranus, Mars, and the moon all at once, can be very much a change-oriented feeling of those points coming together. And in the sign of Gemini, individuals are experiencing that with communications, they're experiencing it with their jobs, depending on where things are hitting in their chart. And I think that there's a moment where I always caution individuals to pause, to take a step back, take a deep breath and breathe, right? And so I also see Gemini in a lot of ways as the breath. So being able to sort of center yourself in the chaos that might be going on around you, your job in that moment isn't to figure out what's next. It's to center yourself and to bring yourself into that point of, okay, I'm going to connect with me. And then I'm going to take this information, Gemini, and I'm going to figure out very carefully and very slowly what to do with all of this. But it's hard when you have those moments of upheaval. And I think that's the challenge and the growth edge as part of this as well, whether it's a conjunction, an opposition, or a square. We've got an opportunity to grow in those moments, and the quality of mind, Gemini, that we bring to those situations, I think, is really important as well.
It's a nerve-wracking combination.
It really is.
Oh yeah.
Well, we did. We kind of created a few different slides just to see where we would go in our general conversation. We have one slide, the USA Sibley chart, July 4th, 1776, of course. And this is a whole can of worms. I think when we were chatting, Janet, you thought, oh, I don't know, do we really want to go into the USA chart? Because it's kind of all, within the annals of astrology, it's a big can of worms. Some astrologers say, first of all, does this chart really symbolize the US? Others say, that the July 4th declaration signing might have happened at a different time, not necessarily at 5:10 p.m. as this chart shows. It might have been 2:10 a.m., which I think is called the Evangeline Adams chart by some. Is that right, you guys?
Something like that.
Yeah.
There's
And that's Gemini rising, right?
Yeah, Gemini. And some people use something that's just past noon because evidently there was some kind of unanimous vote to proceed with the declaration signing.
Mm-hmm.
But no, Janet, you in sharing with us so many interesting techniques. Of course, I'd heard of the inauguration chart of Washington as being perhaps the birthing of this country, formal. But maybe you could take us into this chart. And that was, I should say, April 30th of 1789 at 12:41 in the afternoon in Manhattan. I wonder if it has to do with that pub in downtown Manhattan that I went to once when I was a kid. Isn't there some famous the oldest pub in one of the oldest pubs in the U.S. is in Manhattan, where Washington is the tavern. I forget the name of it. Somebody watching or listening knows what I'm talking about. But that date was April 30, 1789, at 12:41 p.m. in Manhattan, in New York, New York. That was the inauguration chart. So tell me, Janet, why? Yeah, this is one you use a great deal. What about this?
I don't use it a great deal.
Oh,
I
sorry.
prefer it to the Sibley chart. Um, I got the time from Kenneth Bowser, and he wrote an excellent article in an NCGR journal some years ago about the flaws in the creation of the Sibley chart by Sibley. And I thought, oh, well, I've never been a fan of it anyway. Everybody was so big on it because it was so exactly triggered at 9/11. Well,
Yeah.
I look at it as a conception chart, whatever time on the 4th of July the Declaration was signed, conception. But we weren't a country until we had won the war and come up with a constitution and ratified it. And then we had a real leader. And then that's why I use the inauguration of Washington, because then we had all the elements that real countries have. And you'll notice it has some similarity if you want to show up the two side by side.
Mm-hmm.
The Cancer is still an important sign, even though it's an April 30th chart, but it's moon in Cancer. It's guess what? Jupiter in Cancer, which the original, well, the Declaration chart has Jupiter in Cancer also. So it's a Jupiter cycle later that it took us to have to win the war, get the Constitution going, and have an inauguration.
That is something that never crossed my mind to look at. That Jupiter cycle, that orbit of Jupiter, of course, being 12 years. And I always think of it as age, when I think of Jupiter, I think of age 12, age 24, age 36, a Jupiter, our first Jupiter return, our second Jupiter return, coincident with the cycles of growth and expression of self. So the inauguration chart by happenstance, right? We're 1776. So, I'm wondering, literally 1787, would that have been exactly 12 years? But we're more than close enough. Is that right? Am I doing my math there right?
89, 76, 13.
Yeah. So it was a Jupiter.
13. So,
so Jupiter it was doing its orbital thing there for expression, for creative expression. So from the declaration to the actual presidency, I mean, that Jupiter was in Cancer in both cases. That's an interesting thing I never considered.
Well, another thing you might want to think about, if you go back to the Sibley chart,
Okay.
for this, July 4th. So we've got Jupiter here at almost 6. Let's call it 6. And in the summer of 1946, there was an eclipse at, I think this is 6. I have to get my magnifying glass out. Okay. Yeah, 6 Cancer.
Wow.
Okay.
1946.
Yeah. We have 3 presidents who were born before, during, and after that month. We got Trump was born a Gemini in 46. W was born a Cancer in 46. And Clinton was born a Leo in 46. And I think they all had popularity that relates to the USA Jupiter.
And I'm sorry, in 1946, there was a
new moon at 6 of Cancer on USA Jupiter. And so the guys that are born around that grow up to be very popular.
Wow.
Yeah.
Interesting.
That's fun.
Does anybody know? I think, am I mixing my metaphors here? But is this roughly the year that the US has by secondary Jupiter going stationary direct? I think it might be something else to look at by secondary progression. And I think it's again in this area of the chart. It's either the ascendant on it or something like that, but I was double checking if anyone had poked around that. So our chart, the Sibley chart, or that day of the declaration is a key day, either way you slice it. So the inauguration chart, what stands out about this inauguration chart that would be ostensibly the birth of the U.S.? I wonder, not that this is a central point at all of today's discussion, and but I'm just curious, since you've had me
I
on
would look at the Saturn-Jupiter trine
Mhm.
because they're long-term, or they are longer-term transits. They're in good relation with one another. To me, Saturn is government, it's a constitution, it's leadership, it's manifestation of the ideals of Jupiter. So it's a nice thing. Oh, and at this particular moment, look at that's the IC makes a grand trine, and the MC leader makes a kite.
Mm.
Mm,
Mhm.
yeah.
Also, too, we've been doing a lot of discussion, having a lot of discussion rather, Janet, about Pluto and Neptune and Uranus these days. This chart, the inauguration chart, again has at least this trine of Neptune and Pluto.
Yes, it does.
If you include Chiron, of course, these days we do, many of us. There's a nice pretty tight grand trine there as well. But Pluto and Neptune and Uranus deal with sort of Reformation time periods, times of restructuring, and the inauguration chart certainly has that with that Jupiter-Uranus conjunction. That's another factor. And as you said, the sign, not the constellation, the sign of Cancer figures powerfully in both the inauguration chart and the declaration chart of 1776. And the idea of summer, I think of them as summertime signs, Leo, Cancer, the two lights that govern them, the summertime that is the family unity or the coming together. That theme, certainly the idea of, bring us your huddled masses. And, I'm thinking of the Lady Liberty there in New York Harbor.
I'm thinking of Mom, Home, and Apple Pie.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Somebody must be thinking of hot dogs. Somebody, one of you guys?
Only around the 4th of July. Yeah, I haven't the GW inauguration chart is fascinating to me because I've never looked at it before until preparing for this.
Well,
But
Kenneth come up with that precise time, and
yeah,
he did it sidereally, and I'm using it in tropical.
I forgot. I apologize. Did you say that Ken Bowser had rectified it?
I think he might have rectified it a little bit, but it's definitely that at noon they struck out in the parade that marched to Federal Hall for the inauguration. So it could have taken, with pomp and circumstance and prayers and music and all that stuff till 12:41 is believable.
I think what's fascinating is Neptune. Obviously, we know that, the trans-Saturnians, that is Uranus, Neptune, Pluto, don't move that fast. So from the declaration time of 1776 to Washington's inauguration, the first president defining our nation and its own presidential leader versus king versus monarch. The interesting phenomenon is that Neptune, being a powerful placement in either chart, I kind of look at Neptune in the inauguration as a singleton. It's not, of course, technically a bowl pattern, although some I would say it's a bowl pattern personally. But we have, all the planets on one side of the chart, sort of hemispheric, and Neptune all by its lonesome down there. That handle to a bucket, rather, pardon me, a bucket, yeah. And we have a similar, Neptune pattern with Saturn that right now is, I think, important with transits. But nonetheless, again, we have Neptune as a very prominent in the Sibley chart. If we did go with that afternoon 510 Sibley 1776 chart, Neptune figuring very prominently. And of course, the USA, internationally is known for Neptune. We are known for the movies. We're known for Hollywood. When was Neptune discovered? When was, film? When did we discover film and emulsions and chemical emulsions? Neptune processes are all Neptunian. I mean, I also kind of lump in there, it's not quite exactly correct, but, I think of Madame Curie, and her work during the 1800s that led to her death. Things you can't see.
Hmm.
Neptune, radiation, you can't see it. So Neptune has a lot of orientation to things that we can't necessarily easily grasp. Sort of we're breathing nitrogen, oxygen right now, but none of us can grab it and show the audience that we're breathing it, but we kind of know it. It's sort of a psyche thing. So I'm wondering, anybody, what does anybody else see that Neptune is being sort of primacy, at least in these two charts describing the nature of the beast of the US, Neptune ideologies?
So I actually, in looking at this chart, this makes more sense to me. If you go back to the Sibley chart for a second, not only is Neptune having some difficulty in that placement, it's intercepted in the ninth house. It's looking to Mercury for information. Mercury's kind of, you know, in the eighth house, in the sign of Cancer. I would not place that as highly, but I do think with the moon in the third, because I'm just following the leader here, if you will. But with this chart in particular, we've got Neptune in the third house, which makes more sense to me in the sign of Libra. I love the nodal structure here because you're talking about South Node sitting at an anaretic degree in the sign of Taurus, which I'm looking back over to Venus. Just in terms of rounding that out, I take that as describing where we came from, another country. We moved and created our own land, if you will, albeit forcefully against the people that were here. But I think there is some indication of that with Aries on the ninth house cusp, looking to Mars in the sign of Aries in the eighth. So there was some forceful takeover, as we landed here. The sun is the ruler of the chart in this one, again in that ninth house, talking about a foreign country that we created our own land essentially for. So I think, and then we're dealing with all of the Scorpio backlash of what we did to create this country. That is part of our history, but it's always something that we've sort of buried. And, it continues to sort of rise and fall in our consciousness. And I truly see that as that North Node. What is home for us? Home is something that we had to rape and pillage to create, but yet we can still transform it into something very beautiful. This chart makes so much sense to me.
Well, also think of how we came here, originally the pilgrims and all, for freedom of religion.
Right. That ninth house again. Yeah.
And Neptune.
Freedom
And
of our ideas. Yeah. That's so important to us as a country.
and Mercury has exactly squared where it was at the time of the sibling chart.
Very good.
If it's 24 Cancer to
Yes.
24 Aries.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. Yeah.
Well, and of course, this is one of those things that, if you hang with astronomers, as I oftentimes do, none of it they're gonna understand. But we look for patterns. We look for coincidence, and patterns over time. And of course, I do think that was brilliant that you pointed out the Jupiter Cancer for both the Sibley
Mm-hmm.
Declaration of Independence chart in Cancer, and 12 years later, Jupiter back in Cancer again is a really key factor of those coincidences. And that Mercury, by all means, square in both charts. Really, we could say each chart maybe could symbolically, like anything else, show something significant. We could liken it perhaps to, meeting the person or the first date of the person that you later marry. Gee, what was happening that first date chart? And oftentimes there will be juju. There'll be something happening that, leads to a lifetime together, and that's so astrology is always the mirror. It's the as above, so below coincidence. I just wanted to comment when we were looking at that, inauguration. I kind of want to go back to moon grooves before we close, to honor our speaker today, and who's teaching us so many interesting ideas and things. But I did want to honor that Neptune on its own as a singleton planet, in some way, either a funnel to receive, or sometimes, because it is part of a kite pattern, you could say as well, maybe the tail of the kite. It depends on how you want to look at this chart. The chart is flying high with the sun up there, in Taurus with the south node, and the rudder, the tail, is that Neptune ideology, which certainly ideologies and Christian ideologies right about now are particularly in the news as something very, very important. We also have the nodes of this inauguration chart, 29, which figure, because we just had on the angles of this inauguration chart, the 28, 29 Leo Taurus axis of this, what do they call it? The Lion's Gate. The Lion's Gate eclipse. The nodes were at 28, 29 Aquarius and Leo, right on the inauguration chart, ascendant, descendant. So what's visible, the outer world, and how we're organized and structured. That's eclipse this year is a powerful one, and that 29 degrees or 28 degrees of Aquarius falls on the descendant of the inauguration chart. It falls conjoin the moon of the hold on. Here we go. The USA chart, the Sibley chart. So the south node of July, August, really August 2026, the eclipse south node falls on the moon, the people. And there has been a lot of discussion about women. AOC and her freezing her eggs just came up the last few days since the eclipse. The issue of women's rights, and the issue of women marching, the issue of women and reproductive issues, the issue of the people in general, and what's happening with ICE. These are all some powerful themes. The moon is the people in general in astrology and in nations charts, right?
So if you want to look at the moon grooves for what might be coming up that are going to hit even both of these charts, when we get to fall of 27, a year from now, the groove that starts then has the full moons at 21. And 21 is in the inauguration chart. It's got Jupiter, a little bit orb, not much. Definitely the Neptune. And Saturn. Yep, it's going to pick up all three of those.
And that Mercury, would that fit in there too?
Midheaven IC. That's a little wide for me.
Okay.
And if you look at the Sibley, we've got some 21s also. Mars, and Neptune. So, Neptune didn't move too much in those 12 or 13 years, or did it? Wait, no, it moved from Virgo to Libra. It moved about a whole sign. But at any rate, we got some stuff coming up, and we can keep our eyes on that.
So, Janet, will you tell us about your trip to UAC this year? That's next month, September. And you're going to have a booth there. Booth will have a booth. Is that Janet Booth will have a booth?
Well, my business is called Astrology Booth. And so it's the Astrology Booth. And at the Astrology Booth, I'm going to have a little photo booth. It's more like a frame that you can sit down and be photographed in with your own camera. And then you can use the QR code to upload your photo and see other people's photos they've uploaded. And this particular service, you can put in your selfie if there's a lot of photos. I'm hoping a lot of people use this because they can, I don't care if you're just doing from my photo frame or if you're doing it from anywhere in the conference. But if there's a lot of photos, you'll be able to find the ones of you with facial recognition AI.
So
you can download
so,
them and you can, have them, print them, share them, put them on your Facebook, whatever.
so you're having a photo booth.
A photo booth at the Astrology booth number 25 at UAC. And this is to celebrate my 50-year love affair with astrology.
Wonderful.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Janet, for sharing your wisdom here tonight. And you just kind of blew our minds on something completely different, moon grooves, for us to go and search and take it in. So where can people reach you for your work, your sessions, your counseling, your consultations?
So right at astrologybooth.com.
Astrologybooth.com. We'll have it in the show notes, of course, how to reach you.
I know, I'm so lucky I was born with that last name Booth. Worked out great. And Janet for the first name, Janet's Planets. I mean, it doesn't get any better.
But you have one last ditty. Didn't you tell me about asteroids that maybe, is that too much for today?
Well, we've already run long. But if anybody is still here watching this at the very end, they will find this fascinating. So there are asteroids named Booth, and there's one named Janhut, Janhoet. They happened to have been conjunct when I was born, and their conjunction sandwiches my ascendant. Like within the half a degree between Janet and Booth, my ascendant comes right in there. So don't think I wasn't planning this from the other side, because
So the person, it's called personal name asteroids. There are people discover an asteroid, astronomers discover an asteroid, and they say, oh, my daughter's name is Janet, or my mother's maiden name was Booth, and they name the asteroid. So the asteroid's Janhut.
It's named after a Dutchman, Jan Hut, Janhoet, and that's the closest to Janet. There is no asteroid Janet.
So asteroid Janhut.
Conjunct Booth when I was born, so that's good enough for me.
Yeah.
And the ascendant is one's sense of persona. I think that kind of says it all. Fascinating.
Yes.
Well, you do embody Janhut and Booth. Thank you.
Thank you for having me. This has been real fun.
A lot
Thank
of
you,
fun.
Jenna.
Thanks much,
Thank
folks.
you so much.
Thanks for watching.